This is Jagz Kooner, DJ, producer and founding member of the Sabres of Paradise, and you are listening to the Liverpool Connection Podcast, music and football episodes.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Liverpool Connection Podcast. I'm your host Daz. This is my music and football episode where I usually bring on a guest that likes both. Today I've got an absolute legend in the house. When I first started this podcast, I had a few names down that I really wanted. I've already checked a few off with Left Field, 808 State, and here's my next one. It's just unbelievable to me that after 30 years of the first records coming out, that they are back on like tour doing live gigs, and it's amazing to see how much they've grown, but also see how much people have stayed with them, and people are bringing their kids to the gigs, which I think has got to be like a massive, got to feel in the hearts. But I've got DJ, producer, and founding member of Sabres of Paradise, Jagz Kooner. Jagz, welcome officially to the podcast.
Thanks, that's a pleasure to be here, mate. It's I just didn't know how long you were going to go, and my head was just going to explode, and my ego was going to get such a big boost there. But thank you for the lovely, warm introduction. I appreciate it.
It is always crazy. Like I always say this, and I just said it to Jagz as well. Like I do this 15-20 minutes before I press record on the podcast on the mixer, and some of the best conversations happen in those 15-20 minutes. And I always think to myself, why am I not pressing record on the podcast mixer as well? But we are here, and we get to talk about music and a little bit about football as well, and about life. So Jagz, let me ask you, obviously music is a massive part of your life. I always like to know really where like your musical influences came from. Did your mum and dad, what was playing in the house did that have influence on you?
Yeah, so I've got four brothers. Three of them were older than me, and they were always into music anyway, so we had music going on in the house. My family, my mum and dad were, immigrants from India, from Punjab, so the northern states of India. They loved their Bollywood soundtracks and music and movies. They loved all the Indian classical stuff. And then my brothers, in the 1970s, one of them was a soul boy and another one was a punk, and so I had this kind of proper melting pot of like Asian music, Hollywood, Bhangra and that kind of stuff, coupled with the Clash, the Pistols and the Damned, and then my brother was like a soul boy, so there was a lot of sort of disco stuff going on, and I suppose that rubbed off on me, I suppose that had a profound effect on me. I mean, I've always been drawn to music. I did this Q&A a little while ago, and I had to talk about things that defined my career, not songs that are my favourite, but songs that kind of defined my career. 10 songs that defined my career, and one of them was it's an old Muhammad Rafi a Bollywood tune from a film called Amar Akbar Anthony, and I remember listening to that as a kid, and the sound of that record was just phenomenal sounding, and so I had that really inspiring me. And then we had my mum shouting at my brother to turn down the stereo because he's playing like the Pistols and the Clash and stuff upstairs, and all the early punk stuff. And then sometimes my brother used to, he was also, one of my brothers was also a bouncer as well, so he'd be in the West End, and then sometimes I'd sneak in there to various clubs like Maximus as well. And so, this was in my mid-teens as well by then, but it's always been around. None of my family are musical, from the sense that my mum and dad. My mum was a cleaner in a hospital, and my dad was a foreman in a factory, and none of my brothers had any musical skills, and neither did I. So there was no real kind of like, oh, let's sit around the piano and play or whatever, and it was more just a case of being inspired by what I was hearing that kind of, I think, held me in good stead for later life, really.
Yeah, I think like I have an older sister as well, and like I used to borrow her 7 inches, and she was into a bit of everything. I mean, I come from, my mum's a soulstress, loves all the Elvis, the Beatles, and Motown. My dad was a rocker in the family. Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, just Iron Maiden, just hard rock. I was somewhere in between. I mean, I was that crazy kid that, 1 week I'd wear, the stud wristband.
Yeah, I remember I had that. I had that in my 80s b-boy phase as well, so that was the thing, so in the early 80s, the electro thing happened. I mean, I suppose in a weird way, it's like when you're little and your musical tastes are formed by what your surroundings are, and you don't really make independent choices of what your musical genres or what music appeals to you till you're into your early teens, because that's when you start your rebellion phase, apparently, and that's when you kind of go, well, I'm going to find my own tribe, I'm going to find what I'm into, I'm going to get on, and it's about me. It's like, I suppose it's like with your kids as well, I don't know how old they're, but mine was into, like, I mean, these are not bad bands, but she was into Britney Spears when she was little. She was into like Girls Aloud, who I've got to be honest, brilliant band anyway. But your music tastes are then formed by the teeny pop market, and it's only when you get into your actual teens that you go, well, actually, I'm into indie. I'm into the Arctic Monkeys, and I'm into this, and I'm into that. So. My sort of teens was really heavily kind of influenced by the sort of early electro stuff that was coming out of America. The very foundations of hip hop, I would say. Africa Bambaataa, Soul Sonic Force, stuff like that was coming out. And I think and all the early electro stuff, Johnson Crew, that kind of stuff, and I think that was really sort of formed as a result of the fact that I loved British electronic music. I loved like early Human League. I loved Depeche Mode. And I loved all that kind of electronic stuff that was kind of coming up when people got their first synthesizers and drum machines, and they were creating things, and I think from that sort of moved on to me finding obscure 12-inch imports coming in from the States of all these early electro tunes as well, and then when Africa Bambaataa and Soul Sonic Force came along, that was like a real eye-opener for me as well. But I think prior to that, some of the New Order stuff, some of the Factory stuff, the sort of electronic funk kind of stuff that they were doing as well, was very influential, and I think that was the basis of my independence of, this is what I'm about, this is my tribe, this is the music I dig. And prior to that, it was more a case of what my brothers liked, what I was hearing at home, what was on top of the pops, and that was the kind of sort of what that was what we all did growing up. We heard new music on top of the pops, whether it was going back to sort of Bowie and things like that. But and truth be told, Bowie I came back to later on in life. When I was younger, it weren't really my so. Yeah, it's an interesting kind of journey, and this is the thing about music, isn't it? It's like stuff, you can discover stuff from 40 years ago that you'd never heard, and all of a sudden that opens up a whole channel of discovery for you as well. So yeah, it's a great thing, music.
Oh, it is. It can put you in so many different moods. If you want to feel a bit, melancholy, I'll listen to the Smiths. I love the way Morrissey writes. And it kind of relates to me. I'm very big into like lyrics. That's why I love the Jam, the specials. They really like talk to me as a teenager. And my best mate's family are from Barbados, and that's when I first heard dub and reggae coming out of their house, and I was like, "What is this?
Right.
I want more."
Well, when I was growing up, and we'll get on to this a bit later, but in relation to the football side of things. But when I was growing up, I mean, I'm a big Arsenal fan, and we'll come on to that later on. But when I was growing up, it was there was it was a big immigrant community. The people came over from the Caribbean on our road. We had people over from India and Pakistan, and they lived on our road. We had a lot of Irish people as well. That were on the roads and in the community where I lived, and that was my introduction to it as well. It was just like we had neighbours, and the thing is, it's. There's a lot of similarity between Asian and Caribbean foods as well, right? And that's way of being, and curried whatever is a big thing. Rice, rotis, all of that kind of stuff is very similar to Caribbean food and Asian food, and my granddad was a baptized Sikh as well. So you don't cut your hair, you wear a turban and blah blah, and that's pretty much the same for Rastafari as well. That religious belief is you don't cut your hair, you get baptized, and you don't really eat meat. It's mainly kind of vegetarian food, and you have fish or whatever. But it's really similar kind of way of being, and that was my introduction to reggae and dub and stuff. I used to listen to David Rodigan's show I think it was on Capital Radio, which was on a Saturday, and just amazing music coming out. And it was just, this is it. So that sense of discovery that you have from somebody introduced you to something, all of a sudden it's like, right, I'm going to go down this road now and find out exactly what music was created, and and that's the beauty of it. You never stop discovering music like that. It's a brilliant thing.
Yeah, when I think of dub and reggae, immediately I get the smells of jerk chicken and the smell of sage. Like that, those are the two things that like I relate to. Like because my best mate's family, it was just a joy. Like to walk into the house, and a lot of Caribbean, it's a warmth. I've never been over to Jamaica or Barbados. I would love to. I'd love to take the kids.
I've been over a few times, and it's great. But getting to what you're saying, yeah, I mean, that's the same. We had weird food being cooked in our house if you're quintessentially British, and they had weird food cooking in our friend's house because they were Caribbean or whatever. But it's like there was a backlash in the 70s against immigration, and it's kind of back again now over here. But the immigrants who came over in the late 60s, going back to the Windrush generation, but like mainly from the mid 60s to the mid 70s, they brought with them brilliant music. They brought with them brilliant food, and so much so that it's like curry in the UK now isn't it the most popular dish or something? It's just like, well, there you go, and so that we have these things where it's like people are like, oh, we've had enough of immigration, but you just don't know what the next batch of immigrants are going to bring. Are they going to bring a new load of food that's amazing? They're going to bring a new kind of sort of music styles or designs, or we don't, the whole thing is just really quite, you need the world, you need to be able to share these things and create, it's really sad how it's gone, but that's the thing is you associate everything with everything like that when you're growing up as well, because it's that connection that you had with those things, and I love that. This is still, to me, having, like you said, Caribbean or Jamaican food, plantain or whatever, it's just like, it just takes me back, because it's kind of like, not necessarily your mama's home kitchen, home cooking, but it's your neighbours or whatever, so there's a warm nostalgia attached to that as well.
Well, I know which smell I'd rather have than my mum boiling Brussels sprouts and meat to the smell of plantains. I know which one I'd rather have.
Oh, no, we've had this conversation, because it's literally, it's just like, I've seen footage of English people complaining, oh, they come over here, oh, their food smells, they've got these horrible weird smells and blah blah blah, and everything stinks of curry and da 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 da. And it's like, well, what did you used to make then? Oh, well, we used to throw everything in a pan of water, the meat, the veg and everything, and just boil it to within an inch of its life. It's like, great, that's lovely.
Yeah.
And so
7 days a week.
And now, and now curry. Everyone saw the light. Curry's the favourite dish in the UK, and it's just makes sense, doesn't it? And there you go. That came through immigration. That didn't just miraculously arrive on these shores. That came from immigrants coming over here, opening up little restaurants, serving this weird, stinky food that all of a sudden took over the whole of the UK. There you go. There's an argument for immigration done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want to eat fish and chips like every single day. I mean, like tikka masala is the number one served dish in the UK, and that's hats off to the immigrants. I mean,
it absolutely. You know what? I'm the other way round. When I was a kid, we were allowed fish and chips like once a month, right? And so, because we'd have curry every day, because it's what my parents made. And then sort of like, I think like maybe once or twice a month, my mum would be like, okay, should we get fish and chips? And to me, I was like, amazing, I'm going to get to eat something that isn't curry for one night. And I loved my fish and chips, I mean, everyone still does love their fish and chips, and it's still a staple of the English diet. But for me, that was so exciting, getting this fish and chips out of an old newspaper and salt and vinegar in there, and the vinegar just literally running into the ink, and the ink is all smudged on your chips and shit. It was just like, I love that, and it's brilliant. But yeah, I come from the other side. You've had enough of fish and chips, and I was like, I can't wait for it,
Yeah, it's just one like, what's tonight? Fish and chips. Oh god, not again.
Yeah, again, fish and chips again. Well, I was the other way. I was like, what's tonight? What's food for tonight, Mum? Curry. Great.
It works both ways, doesn't it? But yeah, I mean, that's why I'm glad we live in like a world where we can have different cuisines, and there's nothing like the different smells you have in a market.
Well, you go to I think we were talking about this earlier. It's about I've only been to LA and I've only been to New York, but I have travelled the world, and I've been to Japan, I've been around Europe and Far East Asia and blah blah. And the important thing is when you go to different places, is to try the cuisine and try what immerse yourself in what's going on, rather than finding the local McDonald's and just getting a burger and chips that you would have done where you were anyway. And I think that just makes you more world wisely, and you grow as a person as a result of that, I think, as well. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for going out there, seeing things and seeing what is out there.
I've seen that funny video on YouTube about English tourists, and they're interviewing them, and they go, and the guy's moaning, going, you know, I can't find a good pint here. I can't find good fish and chips or a steak kidney pie. It's like, well, why'd you come on holiday then? Like, you're supposed to, wherever you are, immerse yourself in their culture.
Absolutely, and I totally agree with you. But there, I'll take you back to like 30 odd years ago. That when we used to go on tour with the Aloof, the other band I was in, it was when we used to go on tour and we used to go around Europe. You know, we went everywhere. You know, we were all over Europe, and whenever we rocked up in a new town or a new city, we had to send two people out on a reconnaissance mission for a recce, right? And the reason that we sent two people out is one had to go and source all the drugs, find out where all the dealers are, so we could, and the other person's job was to go find an Irish pub, right? It's just like, because some of the band would want a Guinness, and so as much as we were all up for trying new foods and going to places, and fundamentally there is still a little harking back to home that you do want no matter where you go, and that kind of shows through as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like a nice pint of Guinness, because there's a lot of places that actually get it wrong, you know, and you're just like, nah, that's not Guinness. That's, I don't know, some syrup that you just put in a glass. Isn't
that something to do with Guinness doesn't travel well? Like, apparently it's to do with, like, you know, I think the further away from a brewery you are, the worse the Guinness is going to taste, because Guinness just doesn't travel well, apparently, for some reason. So I don't know how much of that's myth and how much of it is actually true, because I remember working, and the thing is, I remember working in a studio in Ireland, and I can't remember the name of it now. I think it's called Grouse Lodge or something, and it's a really famous studio. Michael Jackson recorded in there, and loads of other people, but it's half a mile or a mile from the Guinness brewery, and the Paddy who owned this studio also built a bar in the studio in the grounds, and it's apparently it's one of the best pints of Guinness you could get, because it's the least travelled pint of Guinness that you could get, because it was literally like half a mile from the brewery, right? I mean, I don't drink, and I haven't had a drink for like 30 or over 30 odd years or whatever, but for everybody else, that was like the holy grail. You know, it's not just about this studio's amazing and they've got this amazing equipment and it's brilliant and we've got a swimming pool there and it's a really cool place to hang out and da-da-da. It's one of the best pints of Guinness you're ever going to get, because it's only like half a mile from the brewery. That was one of its selling points. So, yeah, maybe there is something in there. I don't know.
Well, I know Anheuser-Busch, the American company, bought Guinness. So, yeah, I mean, I've had quite a few pints of Guinness over here, and it still doesn't come close to back home.
Right. Okay. I don't know what it. Whether it's the difference in the water or some of the ingredients have to be adjusted for certain regions. I'm not an expert on any of that, and I mean, I was actually I used to work in New York as well. I was over in New York for a while when I was working with David Holmes on David Holmes' album, and one of the things that there used to be a shop called Tea and Sympathy, and it's where all the Brits used to go to get a decent cup of tea, basically, right? And you could buy stuff there that had been imported, like baked beans, Heinz baked beans, because American Heinz baked beans are shit compared to the British Heinz baked. I don't know why. Come on, dude, Heinz is an American company, right? So how can you get it so wrong over there but get it so right over here? Anyway, we digress on that, but it's that kind of, we're back to that harking for that little sense of home that you want as well.
It's so expensive over there as well, just for a can of baked beans, like UK baked beans. It's like $5. I'm like, I really like baked beans, but...
Do you know what, Daz, I'll tell you what, mate, they're not that cheap over here now either. I think with inflation, and I think post-COVID, I think the wars that are going on around the world with climate change, the whole thing of like making things that used to be fairly cheap to make is now longer not the case anymore. You know, there's a shortage of, well, not a shortage of wheat, but the wheat harvest is dwindling due to climate change. The potato harvest is dwindling due to climate change. The cost of transportation and manufacturing has gone up because of the cost of oil. You know, it's just it's almost like a perfect storm. So, you know, don't be too outraged if you come back here and find that a tin of beans is well over £1 here as well. You know.
Oh no, I was back home. Last year or the year before, you know, yeah. And like I try and come home as much as possible, but when you have 4 kids plus the wife on an aeroplane, that's yeah. I mean, you're looking at like a mortgage for a house. Like, yeah, it's just insane. But yeah, I mean, I love my baked beans, but I'm not paying $5 for it. I refuse. That's it. I'm putting my foot down and I refuse. I did want to ask you, like, you know, because I know DJing is a massive part of your life as well. And you started out as like a hip hop DJ.
Yeah.
And I'm the same. I first got introduced to hip hop. I was an exchange student in New York, mid 80s. So, you know, De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, Stetsasonic were huge. And I came into that melting pot and I was like, what is this? Like, you know, because I'd heard what, Wee Papa Girl rappers.
Yeah.
You know, early UK.
Yeah, the UK one. Yeah.
It was a little cheesy novelty to me. So when I first heard like proper rap and hip hop, because I still call it hip hop, rap music to me is a little bit different. It's more.
All falls under the umbrella of hip hop to me. I'm not like I don't split hairs on this. You know, we're going to end up in that scenario where we start talking about house music, and then is it techno, minimal, hard house, happy house, handbag house? You know, I'm not into all these, like, you know. It's just nonsense. You know, it all falls into that same bracket. There's good music in all of it, and then there's a load of shit music in all of it as well. But, you know, the thing is, for me, it falls under the hip hop umbrella, and I'm the same. You know, I was saying earlier, you know, I started off with like really, you know, moving on from like New Order and the factory record stuff, and then listening to what Arthur Baker was doing with the Soul Sonic Force, because obviously he'd worked with New Order as well, and you know, things like that. And it's just kind of the evolution of that into, you know, Curtis Blow came along, you know, and just that really kind of early stuff, Houdini, you know, it's, and then and to me, that was me in my early teens. So I'd be, you know, 13, maybe 14, 15 era, you know, and I saw footage of Grandmaster Flash, you know, cutting up 2 records, and it fucking blew my mind. You know, I was like, what? You know, that's unreal. So I learned how to cut and scratch and mix and all that kind of stuff as a result of that. And it's that was really the start of my musical journey, of me becoming what I became in my career, basically, because I would get 2 records and I put one on, and then that's going on, and then I find the little break in the other one and put it back in, and get the other one ready, and back in it goes, and just keep looping this bit over and over and over again, because it's really hypnotic. It draws you in. It's got that groove that you want in there. And so from that, I got this, I think it's a Newmark mixer, which had a little 4-second sampling time button on it, where if you put a record on, you just went tap, and then tap again, it capture a little bit of the audio in this little sampler, and then you just hit loop and let that play, and then you could just cut and scratch over the top of that, and that was like, okay, this is quite good fun. And then I was like, you know what I might do is I might buy a little drum machine to run alongside that, and I'll have the drum machine running, and then I could just drop in my little samples and cut up bits of records and just mix them in. And then I was like, oh, do you know what? I might buy a little reverb unit to make the drum machine sound bigger and more beefy. So I did that, and then it was like, oh, I might have to buy a little, like, 8-track tape machine so I can record my mixes. And if I fuck one bit up, I can rewind it and go again. You know, it's none of this. You have to do it live, and that's your lot. And so I did that, and then it was like, oh, and then Akai released Akai samplers, and you know, and I got an S950, which was one of their earliest samplers, and then it was a case of you didn't have to do any of that cutting up backwards and forwards. You just hit record in the sampler, put it in the sampler, and bang. And then before you know, I had a little home studio. You know, and that's kind of how it started for a lot of us bedroom producers. You know, we just kind of acquired bits of equipment that we learned to abuse, not necessarily use properly, because nobody really told us how to use them. There was no YouTube to go and have a look at to see how you use stuff. So you just kind of made it up as you kind of went along. You read the instruction manual, or some of us did. A lot of people just didn't even do that. And that was the start of me becoming a studio bod. That's exactly how it came about. You know, it was a natural kind of progression from sort of DJing, cutting up beats, hip hop style of being a DJ, to then integrating that into creating stuff in my bedroom home studio.
Well, so early on, like, I knew for me, like when I put on a record, I like to dissect it. Like, I need to find out what was used. Were you the same early on?
Early on, no. Early on, I really like that. That's great. Buzzing. Now, it's really hard for me to switch off from one side of my brain to the other, because, you know, one side's analytical and the other side's the sort of and it's like, you know, it's really hard for me to actually now listen to a piece of music and just appreciate it for a piece of music without going, oh, I'm not sure if they got the right snare drum sound on that, or I'm not sure if I would have used that synth in the middle 8, or I'm not entirely sure that arrangement's totally correct, or, you know what I mean? After years of being in studios and doing that, you can't help yourself. You end up having that kind of mentality. But I do still listen to a lot of music, and then when I do listen to it, if I don't have that mindset of critiquing it, it means it's a good tune. You know, I'm like, oh, well, I was in the moment, that's great, loving it, and without me going, oh, let's put a different snare drum, or oh, maybe the bass drum could have had a bit more oomph in there, or whatever. You know, none of that. If none of that goes on, to me, that's like I've listened to a piece of music without analysing it and enjoyed it for what it was. But that, unfortunately, is, you know, that's one of the crosses I have to bear as a result of being a music producer, that you do have that sort of like, oh, you know, might just start analysing this rather than enjoying it, you know.
I think that's one of the big reasons why I like vinyl as well, because I would, you know, go to the record shop, buy what I buy, and I come home and I read every little bit of writing on the vinyl, you know.
Yep.
On the, if it's an album, then
yep.
You know, I'll open it up and I'll read every bit. I'll find out like what samples were used, what equipment was used. I mean, that's just me. I just feel like you know, and today.
I did the same. I mean, the thing is, in the olden days, we used to get the record from Woolworths or wherever you got it. You get it home and you put it on, and while you're listening to it, you're looking at the sleeve. You're looking at the lyrics. You're looking at where it's recorded, what instrument they used. You know, I used to get a lot of like the 70s funk records, and every one of them would have listed, you know, the lead singer, what star sign they were, and the bass player, what star sign they were. You know, it's just like, I just loved all that information. It's brilliant. You know, it's like, oh my God, I'm the same, you know, star sign as Sly Stone or whatever. You know, you just randomly think all of these things, and it's just all that, you know, you make that deeper connection with that piece of art. I wouldn't even say if it has to just be on vinyl, but it was just, at that time it was vinyl, but it was just like you make that deeper connection with that piece of art, because it wasn't just the music on that black bit of celluloid. It was also the cover design, the artwork, you know, the sleeve notes or looking at the lyrics that they had. There's a whole, you immersed yourself in it, and I think that's one of the things that seems to have kind of gone now. Music's become quite a throwaway. You listen to a piece of music, you don't really think about it too much. You don't question it from the point of view, oh, I wonder who produced this, I wonder where it's made, I wonder who did the BVs on that, I wonder where what the lyrics are. It's just, there's not that kind of connection anymore for me. Which is a bit sad.
Yeah, well, I mean, DJs, they don't carry record boxes anymore. It's a USB stick. When you buy music these days, it's on your computer. You've downloaded it, so it's faceless to me.
Yeah.
As opposed to having the actual vinyl or CD. CD you could still do the same. You take out the. Yeah. And you read everything, but you immerse yourself in that. You would spend hours in your bedroom just.
Yeah, of course you did. Yeah, that's what I mean. You immersed yourself in that, and that was the beauty of it. It wasn't just that sound coming out of the speakers; it was looking at the artwork on the cover, is finding out information on the sleeve notes about things. It was singing the lyrics as the record's playing, because it was an interactive experience, which I don't think it really is now for 99% of the people listening to music.
Well, I'm running down the road to my mate's house with the brand new vinyl. Now you're running to your mate's house with your phone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, times move on, and things hopefully are progressing for the better, debatable, but it's one of those things where for me you can't fight that, Daz. You can't fight the fact that technology, stuff's going to advance. What you've got to do is position yourself in a way where you maximise what you believe in and what you like. Yeah, you're right. Okay, I heard something on, I don't listen to Spotify, but I heard something on a streaming site. And, it's like, can you find out any more information about it on a streaming site? Not really. They don't provide you with a huge amount of information. Apple Music, they'll give you the lyrics and the lyrics scan as they're coming up. So it's a bit more karaoke-esque than it is an actual fact. You kind of looking at the lyrics and working out what the song's about. You can't really appreciate the fucking artwork because it's on a screen about that fucking big, and it just comes up as a little square, and that don't mean anything. It just seems to be that the music is literally, or the art of appreciating an album is literally become, I don't know. It just seems like nobody cares about it now, and especially from the streaming sites, from the tech giants, from the majority of people listening to music. We have the diehard 1% who are still there holding true to the original cause, but it's where we are in the world now.
It is nice though to see. Like I saw like not a poll, but just on under 25s buying vinyl, it's gone up, which is really nice to hear. These kids, and it's not new music. I mean, it's a percentage of new music, but it's a lot of old music that maybe the parents had played them, and they're like, it's kept it, in here, and they go, I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy that vinyl, and I'm going to start a collection, and I love to hear that.
Well, I mean, you think about it when we were younger, it's like, if you went round somebody's house, what's the first thing you did? You go and have a rummage through their record collection to see. It was like
all the trainers.
Find out your personality, didn't you? Find out their personalities. Like, what records do they like? Who are they digging? Oh, yeah, it's a bit like finding your tribe again, isn't it? It's just like where with the football, it's like whether you're Arsenal or Liverpool or Man City or United or whatever, it's like finding your tribe and who you connect with and who has a similar way of being as you have. So that's kind of gone. You don't really have that kind of connection for a start as well now. But it's but there have been advancements, and there has, because Shazam, for me, it's been a lifesaver on many occasions as well, because I've heard something and it's, without turning into a train spy, you can find out what it is. You can then add it to a playlist, or it'll save it and then come back to it later, and then go and buy it from Bandcamp or whatever. So we do have things that have benefited everybody as well. I mean, I suppose in a way, it's like what we used to have to do was try and find that elusive record, and when we found it, the sense of achievement and fulfillment that we got from finding that record was just amazing. And you don't have that sense of it anymore, because it's instant. It's on your phone. You know what it is within 20 seconds of hearing it, basically. So that kind of searching for something and finding it somewhere, and that kind of like, I've achieved it, I've been on a mission to get it, that's gone. And maybe we've lost something there as well.
Well, I know, like, whenever I would go on holiday, the beach and the pool and all that, I would find a record shop and I would go digging. And every place I've ever been to, that's what I do. It's number one on my list.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a, maybe it's an our age group kind of thing to do, because we grew up with vinyl, we love, but it's still a done thing. It's like, right, where am I? Okay, where's the nearest record shops? What what are they selling? And yeah, you do. You just go in and yeah. I mean, is that a million miles removed from going somewhere new and then wanting to have fish and chips and do you know what I mean? It's like, hold on, aren't you on holiday, or have you gone some far flung? But the beauty of that is, I mean, I was over in Indonesia, and I think I was over in Japan, and you find crazy weird records. There was over in Indonesia, there was a big, in the 1970s, there was a big psychedelic Indonesian scene, and so you find all these obscure records from the 1970s and stuff that can be inspiring or whatever. So yeah, of course, I'm the same. Yeah, you go somewhere, it's like, okay, where's it good to eat that isn't fish and chips, and where's the record shop?
Was John Peel a massive influence on you?
Not hugely, right? I tell you who was a big influence on me. I think the biggest influences on me were probably like David Kid Jensen, Mike, I forgot his surname now, who used to do the Electro Show, David Rodigan, Pete Tong used to come on and do this thing on a Thursday evening, I think it was, on Peter Powell's show, where he talked about the best new records and stuff. So that side of it was quite a big thing for me. John Peel wasn't an overly massive, purely because I think he was on a bit later than I was a little bit younger, and I think for me that was slightly past my staying up late listening to music time, but I did come back to John Peel later on in life, obviously, and then he was a massive supporter of the Sabres as well. He was, he really, kind of took us on board as well. And I think, the thing with him as well is, his knowledge of music and his complete appreciation for left field avant-garde music that wouldn't make the mainstream is probably what held us in good stead when we were doing a load of the Sabre stuff before as well. Otherwise you do start moving into no one's going to like this, and so maybe I should make a pop-based ditty or whatever, but it's like, no, we're just going to do what we want, because hopefully John Peel to play it, and that was the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, he just a massive influence for me, just because I'd never really heard like world music like that before, and like obscure psychedelic rock, and it was just a mismatch of just this crazy music, as a teenager, as most teenagers in England, at our time, top of the pops Thursday night with your family, that's what you used to do. And the stuff on there, you look back now and go, what is that crap, because a lot of it was novelty stuff. You know, you get to see, I saw the Buzzcocks, I think, on Top of the Pops, and I was like, what is this?
This is it. It's just like, you know, people have this kind of rose-tinted glasses view of Top of the Pops in the 1970s, early 80s, where it's the greatest thing on TV. And I, probably about 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago, I don't know if it was on like a classic TV or something, but they were running old episodes of Top of the Pops. Fucking 90% of it was shit. It's like terrible music. It's like, what the hell's that? But you don't remember that. You just remember all the good shit that you heard on Top of the Pops. But I suppose that just goes to show, really, that nothing's really changed from the musical point of view, that most of it is still shite. But there is some good stuff out there. But then you got to find it, you know.
Yeah, you got to dig deep, you know. I wanted to ask you, when was the first time, like, you met Andrew and Gary, like,
so
Sabres, you know, to...
So basically, that all comes back from... I used to work with Dean Thatcher. Dean Thatcher was another really, a big DJ back in the early 90s, and me and Dean used to do some music stuff in the studio where it was an act called The Aloof. We kind of used to do a few things as The Aloof, and then we were looking for a keyboard player, and Gary basically turned up. We got involved with Gary. Gary became part of The Aloof, and then me and Gary formed a production company, and from there, basically I did this bootleg, and apparently it was like Andrew's last record at the Boys Own weekend in East Grinstead, and as a result of that, I think Andrew knew who I was, and obviously I knew who Andrew was because he'd done Loaded and was like one of the most sought after producers and sought after DJs in the entire world at the time. So we'd heard of each other, and we just met each other in Flying, in the nightclub, Soho Theatre Club, Flying it was called, which later on it was a night that Dean Thatcher was a resident at, and Charlie Chester used to run. It's a great club on just below the Astoria in London, just behind there. And and that's where I met Andrew, and Andrew kind of was just like, I'd love to get in the studio with you and do some music, and I was like, great. That'd be amazing. And I was a bit shocked at the time, and so and then we sort of like exchanged details, and we like, let's keep in touch. And you don't know whether it's one of those late night, everyone's had a drink, and then the following day everyone's forgotten what they actually did the night before, let alone follow through on anything that they said they were going to do. And about 2-3 days later, Andrew phoned me and said, "Hey Jags, listen, fancy getting in the studio?" I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Okay." He said, "I've got to do this remix for Jar Wobble it's a track called Visions of You with Sinead O'Connor singing on it. Would you be up for coming into the studio to work on it?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And then just that was the start of it. Went into the studio, started work with Andrew, Gary and me, and went in with Andrew, and it just kind of all gelled, and we had a really good time. Jar Wobble popped into the studio to kind of have a listen to what we're doing, which was quite weird because I love Pill, and it was just like, oh my god, Jar Wobble's in here now. And it's just really surreal moment listening to Sinead O'Connor's incredible vocals on the tape, and then Jar Wobble rocking up, and I'm in the studio with Andrew Weatherall. It was a bit of a surreal moment, really. And that's how we started, and then we just carried on working together, doing a load of remixes and productions. And then Andrew was like, maybe we should form a little outfit, and I was like, yeah, cool. And that's where Sabres of Paradise kind of came from. And then we started to gradually call the mixes Sabres of Paradise, the remixes we were doing, and then started to make our own music. And then that was the platform from which the Sabres of Paradise band was born, really. I mean, it was the Sabres of Paradise band were born from that, but also the Sabres of Paradise label was born from that. Our studio at the time was a studio called Sabre Sonic, which was also the name of the club, Sabre Sonic, that Andrew used to run with Alex Knight. And it was one of those things where it's just like we had a little kind of well-oiled MIDI corporation going on, where we could go in the studio, make this music, Andrew would take it, play, so the music get made in Sabersonic Studios. Andrew would take it, play it in Sabersonic the club, and if it went all right, he'd then take it to the Sabres of Paradise label and put it out on the Sabres of Paradise label. So we had this kind of really good kind of setup going, and it worked really, really well. It's brilliant because it was really self-contained. We could make the music, we could road test the music, we could release the music, and it was great.
Well, I mean, this is just my opinion. It had that punk ethos about it, where you don't care what the new fad is, the new fashion. It was just like a DIY collective.
Absolutely, but that's what it was in the late. I mean, by this time, is you got to be thankful for what Acid House did to everyone, because Acid House, when it came along, there were people who were train drivers all of a sudden stopped becoming train drivers and became managers or DJs or whatever. It actually opened the door for a lot of people to see, actually, I don't have to do the normal run-of-the-mill thing that everyone expects me to do and society is expecting me. There is this thing opening up that I can get involved with. And as a result of that then started the whole ethos of the DIY ethics. It's like, make the music, release it, put it out yourselves, do it. You don't need to do it through a major label or whatever. And then the major label started to get wind of it and were interested in what all these independent acts and artists were doing. And as a result of that, we seem to be in a position where the Sabres of Paradise were really sought after. Left Field were really sought after. Underworld were really sought after. It's just one of those things where, we started off putting them out on Boyzone or Sabres of Paradise or Hard Hands or whatever, and then the next thing, or Gorilla or whatever, next thing it's just like, the majors are like coming with, open blank checkbooks saying, come and sign with us. And that's that DIY ethos really did show through in absolutely everything that was going on around the scene in the early 90s.
Well, I think, whenever, obviously, when you are an artist, you want to make ends meet, you do want money coming in to, put a roof over your head and stuff. But, when big majors start coming in and throwing money at you, yes, and I've heard many stories where an artist will be able to have the run of the mill, get in these $1 million studios.
Yep.
And it's like, I get to play with all these brand new toys, and then within an album, they put out an album, and then the major's like, what is this crap?
Yeah.
Why isn't this part two of what was successful before?
Well, I think the thing what you got to bear in mind is when you are an independent artist back in the 90s, early to mid 90s, if you were an independent artist and you released music yourself, you could make a bloody decent living on it. Mm-hmm. Right? You could do well, all right. You have to bear in mind that in the 90s, if you were in an indie band and you were signed to an indie label, if you were a 4-piece band, you'd all make a decent wage. You'd make more than minimum wage. You'd be on like 20 plus grand a year kind of thing each, as a result of touring, as a result of tour support, as a result of releasing records, as a result of PRS, as a result of the returns that you get from vinyl and CD and merch and everything else. And the thing with that is, it's just like, that kind of support network that you used to have then meant that you didn't have to have a second job. You didn't have to work in a bar or somewhere else and then do music on the side, because at one point, it was like, the music industry, so say like that's the music industry, there used to be this little bit at the top who were the ultra earn shit ton of money, and then from there you had this lot that went down, which were the middle ground, where indie artists and that, you could still make a decent money and you didn't have to have another job. You could make music full time. And then right at the bottom were the people who were crap basically and didn't earn anything out of it whatsoever. But that was just, it's always the way. Now you have this batch at the top that make all the money, and then after that, all this lot all the way down, nobody gets anything now. There is no middle ground. There is no, you could be in a band or an indie band or release records and you'd earn enough money so you didn't need to have a second job. All of that is now completely gone. There is none of that. You either are making a shit ton of money or you're making no money. And that's it. That's the world that we're in now. Whether that's the fault of the streaming services, whether it's the fault of music's now being devalued to the point where it's a kind of fucking elevator music and it's something that goes on in the background, whether the advent of video games and social media and has taken people away from music being such an important part of their lives to now they're more interested in doom scrolling or playing, Warcraft or whatever the fuck, or in my case FIFA still. But you know what I mean? This is the thing is you got this kind of, you have all these other things you can do. Music is not such a prevalent thing in society as it used to be, and maybe it's been devalued by the tech companies, maybe it's been devalued by the fact that there's other things like video games or whatever, but it's a shame because it seems to be that any time you want to sell a product or any time you want people to appreciate something, you always have a bit of music on attached to it in order to make it more viable and appealing to people. So I don't know, there's been a disconnect, and I just wish we could kind of address that as well.
Yeah, so do I. It just always seems to just be in the background now, and it's sad. And then same with the DJ world as well. I mean, I don't like David Guetta's music at all, but I really appreciated what he said in an interview as well. He said, "I am not a DJ anymore. I'm an entertainer," and there is a massive difference.
You know what? I learned a really long time to not to begrudge anyone anything that they're doing, and I learned this in the 1980s. Right? I learned it in the 1980s, and I learned it from Stock Aitken and Waterman. Right? Because it was like, people are like, oh, fucking Stock Aitken and Waterman, they just make a load of shit. Anyone can make that shit. And you know what, Pete Waterman said? He said, fine, go and make it. Do it. Go and make that fucking music that is, that anyone can make. Go and do it. You've seen what we do. Go and do it. And nobody could do it. Because what they did was pretty unique. And whether you liked it or not, they did it really, really well. And I find that same sort of scenario that happened with EDM and with David Guetta, he fell into that same thing. It was like a lot of people are fucking David Guetta, there used to be a picture of a piano which had like 5 notes on it, and that was like David Guetta's piano, and it's just like, I thought that was really derogatory as well, because in all honesty, David Guetta's musically is bombastic and big, it captures that kind of 20,000 people jumping around crazy vibe about it. And yeah, I can totally get where a lot of people don't like it, but at the same time, he can stand up and go, alright, go on, do it. If you don't, go on, do what you think that would make it you be as successful as what I've done and whatever else. And in all honesty, he's got that nailed down for me. I just thought that he's, truth be told, I think he has made a few really decent tunes, especially with Sia as well, but he's just like, and with Becky Hill, did he do something with Becky Hill? Which was really cool. But anyway, it's just, the thing is, he's not in your tribe. That's the thing, it's not your thing, it's not your tribe, it's another tribe, and that tribe that he's part of is a way fucking bigger tribe than your tribe. But it's just, there's a disconnect with, but he's yeah, fair enough, he's an entertainer, and he has said that as well. But at the same time, he's a geek. He's one of them sort of dudes. If you talk about a compressor, he's like, oh yeah, right, yeah, all the EQs and this bit of equipment. He is a studio bod. It's just maybe you don't like his music, but he comes from what he does from the heart, and he does because he loves it, and that's all I could wish for anyone to do. They're doing it because they love it, and it's an interesting one, and maybe he calls himself an entertainer now. He's done right.
All right, yeah, he's.
We have that same thing with Calvin Harris. People are fucking Calvin Harris. I don't know. It's like, and Calvin Harris, he's wrote some massive anthems and tunes, and people slag him off left, right, and centre. But the dude has made some absolute huge bangers, and I'm not begrudging anyone doing that kind of business because maybe he gets paid a huge amount of money or whatever, but that's as a result of the hard work that he's put in. If you go make a shit tune, people will know it's shit, but if you make something from the heart, hopefully people appreciate it for what it is. And I think David Guetta and Calvin Harris and all them people, that's what they do. A lot of that EDM thing isn't my thing, but hey, that's the evolution of music. You know what I mean? We have our sound, and they've moved on to something else, and some of it I appreciate, and some of it I don't.
I can't knock Calvin because he's a Liverpool supporter. So
See, there you go. See, he's in your tribe.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's on the outskirts.
He's kind of stepping in and out. Yeah, because didn't he do the parade? He did the parade the other year, didn't he, when Liverpool won? Yeah. Right, well, there you go.
Yeah, the players love him, so, I'm not going to knock him. So, my next question, the one thing I want to talk about is, getting Sabres back together. I mean, obviously, with the untimely Andrew passing, was it... I mean, with you and Gary, because it is a big thing to resurrect Sabres after 30 plus years.
Yes.
And to dip your feet again, in this music culture that hasn't heard from you in years. As Sabres, obviously, we've heard you, with your productions and your remixes, but to step out with Sabres again, How did that conversation come about?
Okay, so that really started from a conversation that Ian Weatherall, Andrew's brother, had, where he sort of phoned me and said, "Look, Jase, I think it'd be a good idea to do something to mark the anniversary of the Sabres of Paradise's first album, Sabres Sonic, coming out," and that kind of set the wheels in motion. And then I had the Flight Path Estate, who are like the oracle on everything to do with Andrew Weatherall and Sabres and everything. As a matter of fact, I still message Martin and say, "Oh, do you remember this remix we did? Because I don't. Could you tell me something about it? I need some information." And he's like, "Yeah, well, you did that in July of 1993, and there's 3 mixes on there, and the third one is he's just one of those sort of proper oracle boffins and knows everything. And you could get him on like Mastermind, and it'd be like question specialised subject would be the Sabres of Paradise band, and he's going to score 100%. And he asked us to do a Q&A at the Golden Lion in Todmorden, the infamous pub that is so well connected with Andrew and everybody, with the scene. And this was in November 23, and he asked us to come down. He said, "Would you be up to kind of coming down and having a chat about Sabres Sonic?" And I was like, "Yeah, no problem." And he said, "Would you be up for DJing as well?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And he's like, "Would you be able to play some of the remixes and productions you did back then as the Sabres?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course, no problem, I'd love to." So anyway, I put the phone down, and I was like, "Well, I suppose the first thing I better do is go and listen to Sabres Sonic, because I haven't actually listened to it in 30 years to actually remember what the fuck I did back then." Because, the thing is, as a producer, you work on a piece of music, you finish it, and once it's mastered and it's gone out there, you're on to the next project, and then when you've done that and you've finished it, you're on to the next project when you finish that. So you don't ever really stop and kind of go back and look to anything over the years. You just move on and carry on moving on and doing new music, and you don't sort of rest as such. So I was like, "Oh, this is pleasantly surprised listening to this album. It's sounds alright," because obviously I wanted to refresh myself on it, because then I know what I'm doing, and also familiarise myself with the music and maybe jog the memory as to how we did certain things, because obviously people will be asking me at the Q&A about certain things to do with the album. And so I did that, and then I went through my record collection and dug out a whole load of Sabres remixes and productions and Andrew Weatherall things that we did from back then, and they're all on vinyl, so I had to digitize them. So I put them on the record player and kind of recorded them into the computer and then compressed them and remastered them. And when I was doing all that, because I wanted to put them onto USBs rather than taking a whole load of vinyl with me up to the Golden Lion, and I was like, oh, bloody hell, I've forgotten about that remix. That sounds really good, and oh, that sounds really nice. And and then so we went up there, and then I spoke to Gary as well. Gary's like, I was like, do you fancy coming up doing this Q&A up in Golden Lion? He said, well, I live in Bridlington now, so I'll just get the train across. It's not a problem. So anyway, we went and did the Q&A. The Q&A was like, it's like 40, 50 people there, and Adam Turner and Martin Brannigan and Dan and everybody who from the Flight Path Estate was there, and Adam was going to do the Q&A, and Rob Fletcher was there. Rob Fletcher was a guy who was part of the Flight Path Estate crew as well, and he used to run a club called Herbal Tea Party in Manchester in the 90s, and weirdly enough, he said to me, Jags, he said, do you mind, before you lot walk on stage, if I play a live recording of the band when you played my club just before you went and joined Primal Scream on the Give Out tour? This was your warm-up show. I was like, oh wow, you got a recording of it? And he went, yeah. I said, oh blimey, okay, yeah, I don't mind you playing that before we walk on stage for the Q&A. So anyway, we're standing side stage, and we put it on, and I'm like listening to it going, oh my god, this is really good. We were actually a really good band, I just thought we'd always used to get so smashed that I can't remember anything from back then, right, basically. So anyway, I was listening, I was like, bloody hell, this sounds really good. And I said to Gaz, I was like, this sounds really good, doesn't it? What do you think? He's like, oh yes, all right. So then I was like, said to Rob, I said, look, can you, and then the Q&A went really well. Anyway, so we went on stage, did the Q&A went really well, loads of questions. When you're going to re-release the music, blah blah blah. A lot of love for Andrew and for the Sabres, and had a great time. DJ'd, played a load of our own tunes. Everyone's dancing away. It was a brilliant night. And then a few days later, I messaged Rob saying, Rob, can you send me that recording, because I want to play it to some of my sort of associates. So I sent it to some of my sort of Andrew Willis from Primal Scream, sent it to sort of management people, and said, this is the Sabres from the 1990s, what do you think? And they were like, oh my god, this is brilliant, this is really good, and that's kind of what got the ball rolling. And then after that, early 24, I was like, phoned up all the original members. I phoned up Rich Thayer, who was the percussionist in Sabres, and he's still in Red Snapper, and he's moved to Wales. So I was like, would you be interested in possibly maybe doing something with the Sabres if we reform? He said, yeah, definitely. I then reached out to Nick Abnett, who was our bass player, and after the Sabres split, Nick went and joined Death in Vegas. So I managed to track Nick down, and went and had a lunch with him. I said, listen, would you be interested in us kind of getting back together to do it? And he was like, oh, I'd love to, it'd be amazing. So then I tracked down Phil Mossman, who was our guitarist, and Phil had moved to New York, and after leaving Sabres joined LCD Sound System, and was in LCD Sound System for about 10 years, and said to him, would you be up for coming on board? And he said yes as well. So I managed to get the whole of the original live band together, because basically you got to remember that although Andrew was in the Sabres of Paradise, he wasn't actually in the live band. He only wanted a DJ around us. He did one or two shows with us. He just didn't enjoy being on stage as part of a band. So he's like, look, I'll DJ before you and I'll DJ after you, but you lot can just go and do your thing. And so I then got the nod about go ahead and let's get the Sabres together. And then it was a case of having to dig out all the technology from 30 years ago and get that somehow converted to a modern computer system and do. So I had to dig out all my old samplers and sequencers and load up 3.5-inch floppy disks that we used to use in the 1990s and hope that they all work. And luckily everything came back really well. And then so me and Gary then started to rebuild all the live songs. And we reached out to a friend of mine, Alex Bruford, who's an agent, used to be at ATC and now called Roe Martis, and I said, Alex, do you think maybe there might be a bit of interest in the Sabres? So he reached out to a few people, and then the next thing we know, yeah, Jags, Sydney Opera House want you, and Primavera want you to headline on one of the smaller stages. We were like, okay, and I was like, oh shit, do you think we might be advisable to do a kind of warm-up show before we go straight into the Sydney Opera House, because that's a big deal. And then they was like, yeah, all right, great, we'll find someone. So then we managed to get a warm-up gig, which was Fabric, for about 800 people, which isn't that small, but it's also, Fabric was a great building because there's a lot of connection with Andrew with it as well, because he used to DJ there all the time. Big connection with me as well, because I used to do stuff there, DJ for Wall of Sound and various things there. And then, it all came together. We got to Fabric, which was very daunting because it was the first show we'd done in 30 plus years. It was all of our friends and family and Sabres fans, and sometimes a connection of all three. Sabres fans who were family, and and we had to make sure that we went on stage and we didn't screw up, and luckily it was brilliant. It went really, really well. Everyone really loved it. It was very emotional, and then literally got off stage and got on a van and went to the airport and flew straight to Sydney Opera House to play Sydney Opera House, which was unreal. And then spent a day in Sydney, and then flew to Barcelona to do Primavera, and following morning we left Primavera, and within a week I was back home, and it was really surreal. Did this really happen, or did I just dream it or imagine it? And then that was it. And then got the albums re-released. They both charted in the vinyl charts as well. And it's just been a bit of a whirlwind since then, really. We've done a few gigs. We did a tour in November last year. And the thing is, you've got to bear in mind that when the Sabres were around in the 1990s, I think we only ever did about 15 gigs. We did a 5-night tour of the UK. We did 5 nights with Primal Scream on there, supporting them. We went to Japan and did 3 shows, and then we split up, so no one really got to see us. So this time round, we're kind of making sure that everybody who we let down by not actually doing enough gigs will hopefully be able to come to one of the shows and see us before we do finally call it a day. Sort of mid next year, we're going to be done and dusted, and going to put it to rest and ride off into the sunset, and then we're done, basically.
Well, it's crazy to think again, going on in my mind 30 years, 33 years ago when the first album came out. I mean, it's again a pinch me moment, because you only put 3 albums out. It's not like you had a massive body of work.
Well, officially, we only really put 2 albums out. The third was kind of a little kind of compilation of various bits that we had already put out or were elsewhere. So we only really ever completed 2 albums, and that was it. So that makes the pool of music even smaller than 3 albums.
But I think your body of work, stretches to the remixes. Which,
absolutely.
I have a lot of your remixes. Again, they're all different sounding. I mean, the Dust Brothers, Chemical Brothers Now, Song to the Siren remix is just, again, I first saw, and this is crazy too, I first saw Dust Brothers in Orlando, Florida at the end. They played live outside at a rave. And, I was still in the UK at the time, but went on holiday. So it was weird because I'd never seen them before, and I'd heard their name, but I hadn't heard the music. And what came out of those speakers from them was just unreal. And then I went to a record shop in Orlando and I bought the Song to the Siren 12-inch with the
remix,
Sabres remix, and it just you know, it just took my breath away just because, again, you know, it was a little different from what I was used to hearing from you and
Thank you. Yeah.
Again,
we loved working on all the stuff we did. We had a great time in the studio. You know, me, Gary, and Andrew would always have a really good laugh in the studio. We all gelled well. We all had like jobs which complemented each other. Andrew was great with samples and arrangements and helping with the mix. I was good at the programming and doing the drums and stuff. And Gary could play every instrument under the sun. So you know, we'd had a really good team. And you know, obviously Andrew would smoke copious amounts of weed as well. So we'd all get passively stoned, and it was just a right giggle being in the studio with him every day. So you know, and I do miss those times where, you know, there was that you could smoke in a studio or indoors anywhere. B, you could have a right fucking laugh in the, you know. Now it's all become quite clinical and professional, and it's all very you know, get the job done and high pressure, and you know, can't be sitting there smoking weed all day long, and that's part of the appeal and part of what the creative process was. So, yeah, you know, so yeah, they were good times.
Would you consider yourself a perfectionist?
Yeah, but yeah, I would consider myself a perfectionist. And maybe if I'm not a perfectionist as such, I want it to be as good as it possibly can be, which is probably the definition of a perfectionist anyway.
Yeah, and like the art of producing as well. I wanted to ask you about that because you can be, I think, one of the best like singers or bands, but if you don't have the right producer and the right engineer, that can, you know, either, I think, make or break you.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the thing is, you know, the art of a producer, or the ability of a producer, isn't just about how to make a song sound great. Well, actually, no, that is but the way you go about making a song or a recording sound great, it isn't just about getting a really good recording. It's about getting the best out of the people there, and sometimes getting the best out of the people there, it requires various, you know, skills that aren't just related to music. You know, you need to make sure people feel comfortable. You need to make sure that they feel relaxed enough to do it. You know, because you know, you got to bear in mind that when somebody's written a song and they're playing it to you on an acoustic guitar or whatever, you know, they're bearing their soul to you. They're literally standing there naked going, this is me, this is what I'm about, you know. So you've got to then try and translate that into a recording where that really, really shows through. You know, you've got to make sure that, you know, you go into a room and you hear a song and it's like, well, what's that song about? You know, what does that mean to you? Oh, well, it was about my mother passing, or it's about this, or it's about that. So, you know, you've got to draw that emotion into that recording somehow so that people relate to that as well. And it isn't just about, oh, let's make the bass drum sound as good as it possibly can, or make a really crisp recording on the vocals and make sure there's enough sheen around this or whatever. It's like, well, make sure that the recording you do captures the emotion that the artists and the band or the singer was trying to convey when they wrote that song, you know, and make sure you don't lose the essence of it and, you know, throw out the baby with the bathwater by adding a massive production thing to it that may or may not be needed. You know, be true to what the original song is. And then sometimes there's a big there's a lot of psychology in making an album. You've got to, in order to get the best out of people, you've got to, you know, do a lot of ego massaging. You've got to make sure that people feel comfortable doing what they're going to be doing and they're relaxed enough to enjoy it, but then at the same time open to critique and trust you enough to input things and ideas that will be beneficial to the project rather than dismissing what you're going to do because they don't get on with you, you know. So yeah, it's and it's a gradual learning thing, and you do that over the years as well. You're never going to walk into a studio the first time and nail it, and then after that you don't learn anything from it. It's always, everybody's different. Every songwriter is different, and everybody's got a different personality. It's how to get the best out of everybody when you're in that environment in the studio to make sure that you make the best recording possible. But yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of headspace.
It sounds like you're a modern day therapist, putting your arm around the artist.
Well, I mean, I used to have this thing where, if I was going to work with an artist, if I was going to put an album together with somebody, what I'd have to do is listen to the demos and see if I liked them. And if I liked them, the next thing was go and meet the artist. And when I met the artist, it wasn't straight in the studio. It was let's go have a night out. Let's go and get a bit smashed. Let's go to a hotel room and hang out and play each other music. Tell me your life story. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. And then from there, I can then work out whether it's a person that I'd be able to work with. Because then, it's people bearing their soul. It's people telling you what they're into. People digging what you're about. And then you make that connection. And once you have that bond, those people will then trust you with some bizarre random idea that you may have when you're in the recording or songwriting process with them. So yeah, there's a huge amount of that involved. They've got to be able to trust you. They've got to feel confident around you. They've got to be able to listen to you and take on board what you're saying and not just be dismissive because there's a personality clash going on.
Well, I'm sure it's 50-50. It's got to work both ways as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You've got to open up your soul to them as well, for them to trust you and feel comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, you're not going to get a really good recording or a really good take from somebody if they're pissed off with you. I know there's some producers who go, well, yeah, let's get in the studio and get everyone really angry, so they play really hard and whatever. I don't dig that vibe of making an album. That's too volatile and too, it's not my style really. So it has to be a mutual respect thing, definitely.
All right, now's the time of the podcast where I have to congratulate you.
Thank you.
Arsenal winning the league.
Come on, I want to hear the words. Come on, Dad, hear the words. Come on, say it.
Well, we won last year,
Yeah,
so,
and congratulations! What a season that was. Well done. That was brilliant.
Well, anybody to follow a charismatic manager like Klopp,
Are you still believing him? I'll take that as a no.
I think there's just many things that have happened this season. Diego passing away, his brother.
That's unbelievably sad. Really, truly awful.
A horrible start, and I think us as people that like football's part of our daily lives, we don't really. I think it's the same with an artist as well. You kind of feel so far removed from them that you're just when we have a family member die, you probably take a couple of days off or maybe a week off of work and then you go back to work. What we don't understand is this lad was loved by all the Liverpool players, and even Andy Robertson came out and said, look, you expect us to play football when one of our best mates has died horrifically. It was very tough for us. And then you've got new players coming into that environment as well, not knowing, they haven't even established any mates yet. And they're on the outskirts looking in going, oh crap, this is a very somber football team I'm coming into. So there was that, there was the whole Isaac crap where he didn't train for Newcastle. I really didn't like how that went down. I'm not all about somebody going on strike to force a move. That's just not in the way I think. Newcastle rinsed us 120 million on at right now. He's a crock. Hopefully next season He'll get better. He'll get the form he had in Newcastle. I just think injuries just took everything. Just kind of took its toll. For me, Slot got his tactics wrong this year. He's Van Dijk has played every single minute of the Premier League. He's 34 years old. Like, it shouldn't happen. Like, that's the problem. And I mean, we as Liverpool fans, again, we had 9 years of Klopp where there was an identity of football, this heavy metal football. There's no identity with Liverpool at the moment. He's not trusting the youngsters like Klopp did. You know, if there was an injury crisis, Klopp would go, all right, you're good enough, you're 18, get on that pitch. Slot doesn't do that, and we're just not seeing this identity as opposed to last season, where I think it was on the coattails of Klopp squad. I don't believe in like, oh, Slot won with Klopp's team. Klopp didn't win with Klopp's team the year before, so it's nonsense to me. Slot deserves every bit of praise for winning the league, but this season I think he's got a lot wrong, but he's also had a lot of stuff against him. Gahey, that diabolical crap that happened with Palace, we let a 21-year-old Kwanzaa go to Dortmund without bringing in another centre-back, and that's the hierarchy, Edwards and Hughes' fault. As opposed to like what Arsenal did, and you didn't win the league last year because you didn't buy a striker.
We didn't win it for 3 seasons, coming second.
Yeah, well, I mean, Liverpool did the same with City. You know, it's agonising coming bridesmaid. You know, 2-3 seasons in a row. Yeah. But I think with Arsenal, and my hat's off to Arteta and the club, you knew you need to keep these core players and just add 1 or 2 here and there, 1 or 2 here and there. And you can see the football hasn't been the best, mate, I have to say, but that's the whole league. The football this year has been shite. It's been boring. I mean, to me, it just has. But I'll take 1-0 wins, boring football, every day of the week if I win the league.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So first of all, have you actually congratulated me on winning the Premiership?
I did it before, but I'll congratulate you and Arsenal on winning the league.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Well,
oh, ouch! After this, I'm gonna go wash my mouth out.
Okay, so thank you very much for your congratulations, and it's been a long time coming for us. 22 years. It's a really long time to wait, and especially after the previous 3 years where we came in second, which was always heartbreaking, especially because it was always the case of like we do really well throughout the season and right at the end we go, you know. And this year was the same. I was like, are we going to get right to the end of the season and we're just going to go like that, and then City going to pip us? So I'm really happy about what happened. But you're right. You know, the thing is, okay, so first of all, we got to look at the fact that, you know, Arteta is Pep's protege, right? Basically, he worked for Pep, and for me, I think Pep Guardiola is just frighteningly fantastic manager. Like, I don't think, you know, I know, you know, Alex Ferguson's revered high, but for me, the way Pep came along and did what he did, not just here, but at Bayern Munich and Barcelona. I mean, the guy's a serial winner. It's literally like wherever he goes, he wins silverware, and that is just incredible, right? And I do remember, I think the Man United Barcelona game for the Champions League, and Barcelona just running riot, and Alex Ferguson just looking like a little lost lamb, and you could see that Pep was like the rising star on you know, about to fly high. So fair play to City to bring him in, and fair play for City to get Arteta in to basically let him follow around Pep so that he picked up all the tips and tricks that he did. And then fair play to Arsenal for believing in Arteta and giving him all that time to build up what he's done. And I'm going to go back to the time when Man City won the Premiership, when Aguero scored the goal in the dying seconds. I think was it QPR they were playing? I can't remember.
QPR,
yeah. And so that day, I was with Ian Wright, right? So I was with Ian Wright. I think it was Absolute Radio, Ian Wright show. And I was one of the guests inside just watching it all. They had loads of screens with it because the connotations that day were who's going to win the Premiership, who's going to get Champions League, who's going to get relegated. It was all to play for on the last day, right? And then of course Man United scored and they won and they walk in doing the victory lap of honour going thank you very much to everyone, and then the news filtered through that Aguero scored in the very few seconds, and we were watching all this and I'm with Wright, and Wright, he's gone, if Man City win this, which they have now, I think this is the beginning of a dominant phase for Man City in the Premiership. And that came to be true, right? I think for us, as Arsenal, winning what we did after the 3 years of building up to that, coupled with the state that Liverpool are in, Man United are in, Man City, the transition, it's not state, it's more the transition period that everyone's going through, means that as it stands, I think there's a good chance that Arsenal are going to be in a dominant phase for a good few years to come. I could be wrong, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we'll win the Premiership every year. I mean, hell, we're in the Champions League final next week, so who knows where that goes as well. But I think that the way that the board and Kroenke have done what they did with getting him in and believing in him and all the behind-the-scenes people that have been brought in, and the way that the club is gelling, the camaraderie between the players when they're coming on and off the pitch, the way they all believe in each other, the way they interact, the telepathy. I think we are at a point where I think, touch wood, fingers crossed, what Righty said about Man City, we are now at the same place with Arsenal going on to doing a whole load of good things. Could be wrong.
I agree with you. I just think if you would have surrendered the league to City this year, I think you would have been knocked back again.
Oh, well, a few people had this conversation, and I've heard it on like TalkSport and various other people. If Arsenal don't do it this year, the psychological trauma of 4 years of coming second could mean we could be in an irreversible slide where we don't win anything for a long time. And as it stands, I think we're now in a pretty good position because we now have the confidence to go on. And it's been the case as well. I know, yeah, you're right. The football this year's not been as pretty, but then you have these phases where you have like certain teams who are really, really dominant and have this way of playing where nobody else can match them. And then all of a sudden, within a season or two, everybody tweaks what their game is and tweaks their team to match them. And we've now got this season where, hey, Bournemouth and a few other people like that have come up. Sunderland, Jesus Christ, what the fuck? Sunderland is running. So we're in this position now where, the divide between the really, really super big teams, we'll talk about the big six in a minute, which were the big teams versus the ones who just scrape through. The divide between them isn't that great now. You've got the teams who are near the bottom half of the table knocking out some of the top teams, who are near the top of the table. And I think, like you said, this season's not been great for football from that point of view. But I think the thing is, everyone's tweaked how every other team plays. Everyone has so much analysis, and I think this year as well there was a lot of AI involved in the permutations of how games could be played out, the strengths of individuals, data manipulation for individual players, which is creating this kind of like, well, you're great for 78 minutes, but in the last 12 minutes you're not great. Okay, we're going to bear that in mind and sub you at 77, 78 minutes, and you're off, and we'll bring... there's a lot of AI and data-driven analytics that's been brought in, and that's probably not made the game very spontaneous and rewarding as a fan, but as a manager, as a club, as a fan of each individual club, you have to take, you have to give the board and the management credit for playing teams and playing it safe in order to get those 1-0 results that you want,
Yeah, well, I mean, if you listen to Arsenal TV the last couple of seasons with some of the, and I will call them Muppets, just screaming like Arteta needs to be sacked and all this nonsense. I mean, that's the thing. It's a hyperbole. There's Liverpool channels out there that, you lose a match and it's, sack this manager, sack this player. The abuse that they get, it's just, it drives me up the wall.
I won't take any kind of punditry from anyone unless they've played at a professional level and they've experienced some kind of management roles in the teams that they're talking about. I'll listen to Shearer because he's been everywhere, done everything, involved with the board via management, and he knows how everything works. He knows how to get things done, and he understands how it is. Same with Wrighty. He's another one who's just like been there, seen it, done it, knows how it goes on behind the scenes, has connections with relevant people. So I will listen to them. Some snotty-nosed kid who's on the Arsenal podcast, who's basically might just go to every other home game or whatever, has no understanding of how behind the scenes shit's done, is all of a sudden is the mouthpiece for Arsenal. No, go fuck yourself, mate. I ain't got, sod that lot. I'm not interested in any of that. And this is the thing. But everyone will have an opinion. This is the thing with football. Everyone has an opinion. It's like I'm not going to listen to Dave, who's never been to a match and watches Match of the Day and then screams abuse at his telly because he's had a few pints down the pub and all of a sudden he knows better than all the experts out there. I ain't going to listen to him either. So the thing is, it's just like, you can get angry about it, but the whole thing, all of this always comes back to a thing that a good friend of mine, John Reverend from Reverend and the Makers, John McClure from Reverend and the Makers, said basically, if there's two blokes arguing about football, it's literally two bald men fighting over a comb, and it's true. It's just what you did. You can have your opinion, but if you can have a fight over it, it's just like, well, you're not part of it. And so, but so I'm very happy at the moment. I am looking forward to the Champions League at the weekend. I've recorded the Arsenal celebrations. I've seen all the bits and bobs from around the world. In Nairobi, 100,000 people are out in the street, and there's a lot of we've waited a long time for this, and everyone's going to relish every moment of it, and I'm immensely proud of the team. I'm immensely proud of the board and the owners sticking with Arteta and Arteta doing what he does. Because let's be honest, like I said, he's Pep's protege, and for me, Pep was the manager that is beyond. I'm going to get it in the neck from United fans. So no, Alex Ferguson did this. Yeah, and he did. But for me, Pep, his style of playing, his style of management, the way he's got everything out of the players is like nothing I've ever seen before. So I'm happy that we've got his protege come through to Arsenal now.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Klopp, for me, because Liverpool hadn't won the league for 30 plus years. And I think once you get over winning one of the majors, either the Champions League or the league, I think you're in good stead for the next year and the next year.
It gives you the confidence, it gives you the strength, but it also gives you other teams the fear. You got to bear in mind that for the Champions League group stages, right the way through, we annihilated absolutely everybody. Most games nobody could even score against us, and we finished top. So that puts the fear into people as well. It's not even just about that one game that's coming up next week. People see that, they analyse that, they look at the data. AI does a bit of number crunching, and all of a sudden goes, holy shit, Arsenal, oh my god, all right, and puts a bit of fear into you. But you're right with Klopp. Klopp and Pep, two of a kind. What they brought to the Premiership, that intense attacking football, that relentless onslaught, and all they wanted was players whose stamina levels were like, you could do 90 minutes and then you could do another 90 minutes. You know what I mean? And it was just like, loved it, absolutely loved it, and that's what But the problem is with that as well. We were saying is the fact that when you play like that, other teams do start sussing you out, and then it eventually gets to the point where it's cancelling each other out, and you do have the season which we just had, which I'm thankful for the way it went, obviously, but at the same time, as football went, it's probably not as exciting as some of the other seasons as a neutral, but as an Arsenal fan, I'll take those 1-0 every day of the week.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. It doesn't matter how you win the league; it's if you win the league. No Arsenal fan is going to look back in 10 years' time and go, "Oh man, all those 1-0s. Who cares? It has your name, Arsenal Football Club." 2026 on that league trophy.
Exactly, on that trophy it says they're the winners. Arsenal, we're the winners of this season, which means we were the best team that year. Yeah. Simple as that. That's all it means, and there you go. Well, that's where we are, and I'm excited about it moving forward. I mean, it's one of those things where, let's see what happens. Maybe this is a good few dominant years. We've waited a long time for it, so let's see what happens.
It's a bit like fashion, isn't it? How things come back
around. Hey, 30 years later, the Sabres of Paradise are back. So, hey, 22 years later, maybe the glory days of Arsenal are back as well.
Yeah, well, hopefully not too long. Hopefully Liverpool get back.
I'm ready for this.
It's got to be a massive summer for Liverpool. We've got to get the right players in. If Slot's going to go, then let him go.
I mean, I just think you did spend wisely. I mean, last year, what was it? 448 million.
Yeah.
400. Come on, dude.
Yeah. The problem is we sold a lot, and I think we let Diaz go again without getting a replacement in. You cannot put all your eggs in a 17-year-old kid in Rio. He's learning on the job. I
accept that. But it isn't down to just one signing, is it? It's 400. They didn't spend 440 million on him. This is a lot of ins and outs and a lot of swap deals and blah blah blah, and it hasn't worked. And who at Liverpool FC is going to take the blame for that? Where does all the blame on that lie?
Well, I mean, Slot is a coach. He's not a manager, so he doesn't really have a say in the transfers. But you get online, and I just, this is the most toxic I've ever seen Liverpool fans for a very long time. Roy Hodgson, there's a lot of toxicity around that era. But there's no need. If Slot's not the right person, the club will do the right thing and move him on and bring on somebody who is. But, all this, like, he's a bald fraud, he's a, fat piece of shit. I'm like, why do you need to this name calling?
This gets into that conversation we had before you started hitting record, which is basically you could be a hero 1 minute and then you're a villain the next. We were talking before we started to do the podcast about David Beckham. We were talking about the World Cup and blah blah blah, but we were talking about David Beckham, how when he was at the World Cup and they played Argentina and then he laid on the floor and then he kicked out and he kicked Diego Simeone and then he was got a red card, got sent off, and he was the pariah. He was in the news as the most hated man in the country. People were calling for, people were saying, I hope your kids get cancer and things like that. It's just real horrific stuff. But, they forgot 2 months earlier he scored that free kick against Greece that got England into the World Cup. That's forgotten about. It's all of a sudden, and so there is this, if you're going to get into football and you're going to become a football player and you're going to become a big league player and you're going to become world famous or whatever, I don't envy you for 1 minute, because the amount of shit that you're going to get, as well as the glory, is it will destroy people. It will just, your mental health must be shot to bits. Obviously when it's great and you're loved, it's amazing, but when you do something like that, I mean, that must be near suicidal tendencies, right? Because it's just like the entire country hates you, and you feel it.
I mean, it's not like, footballers in the 70s and 80s and 90s. There was no social media. If you played a crap game, they'll probably say something in a newspaper. So you just don't pick up newspapers.
But in the 70s, if you did play a crap game, all you did was afterwards go to the pub and get absolutely and then have a fun, and then go home to your wife or whatever, and that was it, job done. But now it's a different world out there, and now you see everything in real time when you're getting slagged off or people being nasty. And it's just, I don't know. There's got to be some kind of, if you're going to post something, stand by it. Mm-hmm. When somebody comes knocking at your door saying, "Why did you say that?" stand by it. And if you can't stand by it and you're going to hide behind a pseudonym name with a fake ID and shit, don't bother saying it. Be a man, be a grown up, be a person about it. Don't be a chicken coward sort of thing. So it's where we are though. That's the world we live in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've got it about the Sabres. How dare you reform the Sabres of Paradise without Andrew? How it's like other people going, I can't believe you stole the name the Sabres of Paradise off Andrew and managed to do what you're doing. Has nobody complained? I bet the other day was like, I think you might need to Google the Sabres of Paradise and see what images come up. Anyway, but yeah. This is the world we live in, and we all get affected by that. We see that, we're like, oh, it's a little dig at you, but yeah, that's where we are. I can't, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just mental, though. I mean, it's the same, with the Prodigy. How can you keep going without Keith? It's just or even Depeche Mode. Andy Fletch.
Yeah.
That's not Depeche Mode anymore, or Vince.
Yeah, because the rest of the band members, it's like the rest of the band members didn't matter. It was all, it was that one person. Other than that, nobody else did anything. It was all them. So I don't know. It's just like it's a sad world we live in. But majority of people are really positive, and we've got to look at the positives and take that on board, and just dismiss the negatives and not let that affect us too much, even though it does. But that's just the way of the world now.
Jagz, here's the thing. You know Andrew better than me, better than 90% of the Sabres fans. So you know what he would be happy with.
We spent 7 years in the studio together, and most times it was 5-6 days a week or whatever. And for me, originally reforming the Sabres of Paradise was it was a no. I'm not doing that, because Andrew always used to say to me, he's like, "Jagz, this week is year zero. What we did last week doesn't matter. It's all about what we do this week, and then next week we start again." And blah. And it's only when I spoke to Lizzie, Andrew's partner, and I said, "What do you think?" And she said, "Well, the thing is, Jagz, there is no more year zeros. There is nothing, because there's not going to be any new music. Andrew's gone. All we've got is what he left us, and we have to do whatever we can to cherish that, because there won't be any new music. There isn't anything new to look forward to. All we got is what we have. So you need to do something with it, and we fully back you and support you in what you're doing." And that's how it came to be. So that was kind of like, oh yeah, right, okay, Andrew's gone now, there ain't going to be anything other than what he left us, so we got to share that with the world as much as we possibly can, and that's kind of what we're doing. And then we're going to be done by middle of this time next year. We're done. We're going to call it a day by then, and then that's it. So round about May, June time next year, we'll be out of it, and that's it. So it's like we would have done what we had to do. Everybody who never got to see us before or experience what the Sabres were like, hopefully we'll get a chance to do that before we do ride off into the sunset.
Well, hopefully I'll be one of those people that,
I hope so too.
Get to a gig back home and just take it all in. Because, I know those first chords will hit me. You know, I'm very like.
It's been emotional. It's been emotional. I mean, you know, we've been doing a few shows, and you know, when we do the Smoke Belch beatless version with the live band, you know, there's projections of Andrew behind on us. You know, you know, there's seen a good few people shed a tear and get very emotional over it. So it's been an incredible journey over the last year and a bit.
Oh, mate, it has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you, and
likewise.
I always say an hour goes by too quickly, but this is nearly 2 hours.
Yeah, I think we've done about 2 hours 15 minutes. So it's been a really good chat, mate. It's been amazing, Daz. Brilliant.
You know, it's my pleasure to have you on again. Like I said, you know, I know we talked a little bit last year, back and forth. I was trying to get you on, and I know, you know, you were just caught up with producing and everything, and
yeah, on tour. I think we had the November tour as well to do. So the Sabres were on tour in November. I had to sort out stuff for Primal Scream. I had to get bits and bobs ready for Exterminator because they're doing the same thing. They're taking Exterminator out on the road. As a matter of fact, we've just lost our guitarist Phil Mossman to Primal Scream. He's now the bass player in Primal Scream, but you know, they're family. They're extended family. So you know, it's always a really nice thing for him to. Basically, he described it as this: it's like playing for your boyhood club of Arsenal, and then all of a sudden Real Madrid come knocking at your door. You don't say no, do you? So he's got Sabres to Primal Scream is the equivalent of moving from Arsenal to Real Madrid, and you never say no to Real.
Yeah, and I mean, it'd be a massive difference if it was Arsenal to Spurs.
I'm not even going to go there because, you know, I mean, you know, let's not dwell on that. But you know, that was there's got to be an overhaul at Spurs. I'm sorry, just 2 seasons, 17th, scraping through, not just on the verge of relegation. Come on, get it sorted. That would have been that icing on the cake, though. I know for every Arsenal supporter, you win the league, they get relegated. It would be quite fitting for them to go from the amount of abuse that Arsenal get, but then at the same time, I do have a load of friends who are Spurs fans, and I have a load of friends and family who are like West Ham fans, and you know. To me, you know, it's a shame when any club sort of goes down. But you know what? You know, if you do go down, you do only have yourselves to blame. You know, you can blame injuries, you can blame bad management, you can blame the board decisions, you can blame this, but ultimately, you got to blame yourselves for it because you just didn't get enough points to keep you up, and for Spurs to be in that position is shocking. You know, Spurs are as big a club almost as Arsenal and Liverpool. I mean, they're considered one of the big 6, right? They're considered one of the big 6, and the big 6 is Man United, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, how, if any of those teams are fighting for survival from relegation and nobody is, I mean, obviously that's beyond comprehension for any of the other teams, but for Spurs to be in that position twice in the space of 2 years, I just think that's just outrageous that the management and the board and everybody else are in such disarray for that to happen after they've built this fancy, shining new cathedral to I wouldn't even say football, it's just to entertainment. They put more gigs on there, Beyonce and everybody rocking up and doing what they do, than they give a fuck about the football that goes on there. So really, you know, as friends and colleagues who are Spurs fans, it's like, I don't know why they are not complaining constantly, writing letters to the board saying this can't happen again, you know. But we'll see. Zerbi's good. I like him as a manager. You know, let's see if he pulls something out of the bag next year.
Yeah, let's see. But yeah, thank you again. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, put your notifications on. As I always say, we live in a crazy world right now. We have for a while. Just be nice to one another. There's no need to be an arsehole. Just be nice, look after one another, and we'll have a better world. Until next time, look after one another and stay safe, and I'll see you next time.